There are mornings when you open your eyes and feel as if something inside you has chosen not to return. You sit on the edge of the bed, or maybe you don't even make it that far, and a heaviness spreads through your chest like a quiet fog. It isn't simply tiredness. It isn't laziness. It feels more like a quiet whisper from somewhere deep within you, a whisper saying that the life you've been trying to keep up with is no longer the life your inner world can support. You move through the motions as if you're wearing a body without a pulse, as if you've become a visitor in your own existence. And the question rises naturally: why does it feel as though your soul no longer wants to wake up? That feeling, the dull ache, the empty spaces between your breaths, the sense that you are physically present but spiritually absent, is not a personal failure. It is not a sign that you lack discipline or strength. It is the first soft echo of a deeper calling. When the inner fire fades, it's often because you've drifted too far from what once made you feel alive. Your energy withdraws from a life that no longer reflects who you are becoming, and that withdrawal appears on the surface as exhaustion. The world teaches you to fear this quiet, to quickly fix it, or ignore it, to push past it with busyness, pressure, or forced optimism. But the truth is gentler. It's more sacred. Within that fatigue lies an invitation not to give up, but to begin again from a truer place. The sense of emptiness emerges when you've lived too long in a way that does not honor your deeper nature. You're not meant to simply function. You are meant to feel alive. And when aliveness disappears, the soul dims its light to call you home. It's as though life is pausing you, so you can notice the subtle tremor within the soft plea, asking you to stop betraying your own longing. If you listen closely, beneath the heaviness, there is a tremble, a quiet yearning, a reminder that the point of living is not to perform, but to experience yourself fully. The exhaustion you feel is not the absence of life, but the beginning of your return to it. It is the first threshold, the silent doorway, the moment when the world goes quiet enough for you to finally hear what your inner voice has been trying to say all along. And once you stand in that silence, long enough to recognize it as a calling rather than a collapse, something inside you begins to shift, preparing you for the next part of the journey that awaits beneath the surface of this pause. You tell yourself you're just tired. You convince yourself that a little more rest, a little more discipline, a little more pretending will fix everything. You cling to routines that once gave you structure, even though now they feel like chains. You replay the same thoughts. Maybe tomorrow will be different. Maybe I only need a few days. Maybe I'm just being dramatic. It's a familiar dance, the attempt to minimize a truth that feels too big and too frightening to acknowledge. Because beneath the exhaustion lies something far more unsettling, the sense that the life you've been holding on to no longer fits the person you're becoming. There's a part of you that tries so hard to stay in the old shape. You put on the mask of, "I'm fine," even when something inside you is dissolving. You attend conversations with a smile that doesn't reach where it once did. You wake up each morning hoping to recover a version of yourself that quietly slipped away months or even years ago. And as you keep pushing, pretending, insisting that you're okay, another part of you whispers through the cracks. It's the part that's terrified of change, terrified of acknowledging that something fundamental must shift. Letting go feels like failure. Stopping feels like defeat. But the real truth is far more tender. You don't resist because you're weak. You resist because you're human. We all cling to what is familiar, even when the familiar has stopped nourishing us. We fear the unknown more than the discomfort we've grown used to. The mind tells us it's safer to hold on to the predictable pain than to walk into the vast open space of possibility. And so, you delay the calling by staying in a life that no longer reflects your inner truth. But delaying doesn't save you, it only prolongs the ache. The soul has a way of waiting patiently, yet firmly refusing to return energy to paths that are no longer meant for you. The more you ignore that quiet insistence, the heavier everything becomes. Letting yourself pause long enough to recognize this resistance is the first soft surrender. It's the moment you stop fighting the call and begin to sense that something inside you isn't trying to break you, it's trying to free you. And once that realization settles, the descent begins not as a fall into darkness, but as a necessary journey inward, where the old identity loosens its grip and the deeper layers of your being begin to rise. There comes a moment when the resistance can no longer hold. You stop trying to outrun the heaviness, and instead, you feel yourself sinking into it, not in defeat, but in a strange kind of surrender. Life becomes quieter in a way that's almost unsettling. The colors fade a little, the world feels distant, and you move through your days as if wrapped in a thin veil. It's as though you've slipped into an inner landscape where familiar landmarks no longer guide you. You can't rely on old motivations, old ambitions, or even old versions of yourself. Something inside you has gone still, and that stillness feels like both a loss and a strange sort of invitation. This is the descent, the moment your inner world pulls you inward, regardless of whether you feel ready. You may feel lost, disconnected, or as if the person you were has quietly disappeared. Even simple things feel heavy getting up, making decisions, responding to the world. You sense an inner dimming that you can't explain to anyone, and so you withdraw, not because you want to, but because your inner landscape is shifting in ways you can't yet name. You might look in the mirror and not fully recognize the eyes staring back. You are present, but not fully here. Alive, but not fully living. What feels like a collapse is often the first sacred unraveling. The old layers of identity, the roles you clung to, the expectations you carried, they begin to fall away in the quiet. This inner darkness is not a punishment, it is a cocoon, a necessary silence that allows the deeper currents of your being to rearrange themselves without the noise of daily life drowning them out. When everything familiar begins to dissolve, it can feel terrifying, like you've been swallowed whole by something larger than yourself. Yet in this quiet obscurity, something essential is quietly forming. There is a kind of wisdom that only arrives when the outer world grows dim. It's a wisdom that requires solitude, stillness, and the willingness to sit in the dark long enough for your true self to make itself known again. The descent is not about losing your way. It's about losing the ways that no longer belong to you. It's a journey into the depths where your inner life begins reshaping itself from the inside out, preparing you for a renewal you cannot yet see. And as you linger in this space, the shadows begin to shift, revealing the deeper layers you've long avoided, inviting you to face what has been waiting for your attention all along. As you move deeper into this inner night, you begin to encounter parts of yourself you've spent years, maybe decades, trying not to see. They show up in unexpected moments, a sudden wave of self-doubt, a tightness in the chest, a memory that surfaces without warning, emotions that seem too large for the moment you're in. It can feel as though something inside you has cracked open, releasing shadows you thought you'd outgrown. But these shadows were never gone. They were simply waiting for a moment when you were quiet enough, still enough, honest enough to meet them. This meeting is not a failure. It's not a regression. It's a necessary passage through the terrain of your own inner world. The heaviness you feel isn't coming from the outside. It's rising from within, from places that have long needed your presence. You may notice the voice that judges you harshly, the fear that whispers you are not enough, the unresolved grief that tightens your throat when no one is watching. These are not enemies. They are forgotten parts of you asking to be acknowledged. Each emotion carries its own story, its own wound, and its own hidden doorway back to your vitality. There is a kind of courage required here, not the loud, heroic bravery of the outer world, but the quiet willingness to sit with what feels uncomfortable. Your shadows are not here to harm you. They are the guardians of your transformation. They hold the energy you abandoned when you chose survival over authenticity, when you silenced yourself to be accepted, when you hid your pain to appear strong. Facing these inner figures releases the life force you once buried. Every tear, every trembling breath, every truth you admit to yourself becomes a small act of reclamation. You begin to see that the real struggle was never with the world outside, but with the parts of yourself you feared to come home to. And as you allow these inner forms to surface, you realize that the darkness is not empty. It is full of messages, full of guidance, full of the raw material needed for your rebirth. The heaviness that once felt suffocating slowly becomes a teacher, revealing what you must release and what you must reclaim to walk forward with wholeness. In this meeting with your own depths, something begins to dissolve the rigid identity you once clung to, the old defenses, the constant self-protection. Through the very act of facing what you once avoided, you begin to soften, to open, to allow your inner life to breathe again. And it is in this softening that a subtle shift begins, the first quiet spark of renewal, flickering within the very darkness you once feared. There comes a point in this inner journey when something inside you breaks open so completely that the person you once tried to be can no longer hold itself together. It isn't a dramatic moment. In fact, it's often quiet a moment when you finally stop trying to force yourself back into an old shape. You stop pretending to be who you were. Stop pushing yourself to feel the way you think you should feel. Stop grasping at the fragments of an identity that has already dissolved. It feels like a small death, and in many ways it is. The version of you that survived through effort, through pressure, through constant self-holding, finally reaches its limit. At first, this collapse feels frightening. You sense yourself slipping out of old certainties, losing the solidity you once relied on. The ambitions that used to drive you now feel foreign. The roles you used to perform feel empty. Even your dreams feel distant, almost like they belong to someone else. It's as though life has paused you in the center of an immense silence, asking you to sit with nothing but your own truth. And in this stillness, you discover that the deepest transformation rarely comes from striving. It comes from surrender. There is a quiet beauty in letting yourself fall. Not the fall of despair, but the fall of release. The fall that happens when you stop resisting what your inner world has been trying to tell you. This inner space, stripped of pretense and pressure, becomes fertile ground for rebirth. The energy you once used to hold yourself together begins to dissolve, creating room for something new to emerge. It's like watching a candle melt. The form you once knew softens, but through that softening, a new radiance begins to appear. In this stillness, you may feel moments of unexpected peace, a soft ease that washes over you, not because all your problems have disappeared, but because the struggle to carry them has loosened. You sense an opening, a spaciousness in your chest, a quiet clarity that wasn't there before. This is the early light of inner renewal, gentle, fragile, yet unmistakably real. It whispers that what is dying within you is not your life, but the illusions that kept you from living it fully. This is the turning point, the moment the old self dissolves enough for the true self to breathe. You may not yet know who you are becoming, but you can feel that something in you is waking slowly, quietly, with a tenderness you didn't expect. And from this awakening, a new sense of direction begins to form, not from pressure or fear, but from the simple honesty of your own being. And as this light gathers strength, you begin to sense the treasure hidden beneath all this unraveling, the return of the inner flame you thought you had lost. As the inner light begins to rise again, it doesn't arrive with thunder or fireworks. It comes gently, almost shyly, like the first warmth of dawn, spreading across a landscape that has endured a long winter. You begin noticing small shifts before you understand their significance. A thought that once felt heavy now carries a hint of possibility. A moment that would have drained you now feels spacious. You feel an unfamiliar calm, not because life has suddenly become easy, but because something inside you has stopped fighting itself. This renewed presence is the treasure that emerges after the long descent. It isn't something the world can hand you. It rises from the quiet interior where your true self has been slowly gathering strength. The heaviness that once weighed on your chest lightens just enough for you to breathe more deeply. You sense an inner steadiness, subtle but unmistakable, as if you've reclaimed a piece of yourself that you didn't realize had gone missing. It isn't a dramatic transformation. It's quieter, more intimate. It feels like finding a small flame glowing in a corner of your heart, a reminder that your inner world has been working tirelessly even when you felt motionless on the outside. What returns to you in this stage is not the older version of your energy. It's a deeper one, a wiser one. It holds the softness of someone who has traveled through their own shadows and returned with compassion. You begin to understand that the real treasure isn't eternal happiness or constant motivation. It's the ability to remain rooted in yourself even when everything around you shifts. It's the quiet confidence that you can meet life as it is without abandoning who you are. This is the inner light, not the blinding light of perfection, but the steady flame of authenticity. You find yourself less interested in impressing the world and more drawn to living a life of truthfulness. You feel a tenderness toward yourself that wasn't there before, as if the journey through the dark has softened your edges and opened your eyes to your own humanity. You notice beauty in places you overlooked. You feel gratitude for breaths you once took for granted. You begin to trust the rhythm of your own being again. And with this renewed trust comes a gentle readiness, a sense that the world outside is no longer something you must endure or escape, but a space where your inner light can finally begin to move, to express, to shape your days with quiet clarity. From here, a new path begins to open, not a return to who you were, but a return to the world as who you are now. As this new presence settles within you, the world around you begins to take on a different texture. It's not that the external circumstances suddenly transform. It's that you return to them with a softened gaze and a steadier heart. You re-enter your own life quietly, almost cautiously, as if learning to walk again after a long period of stillness. Tasks that once felt overwhelming now feel manageable. Conversations that once drained you now feel like gentle exchanges. You begin carrying yourself differently, not with the frantic urgency of someone trying to keep up, but with the calm assurance of someone who has touched their own depths and returned with a deeper understanding. This stage isn't about becoming untouchable or invincible. It's about becoming real. You show up in daily life with a sense of groundedness that others might notice but can't quite name. There's a quiet clarity in your actions and honesty in your choices. You don't rush yourself the way you used to. You don't abandon yourself in the name of pleasing others. The world hasn't changed yet. Somehow everything feels different because you have changed. You are no longer operating from the fragmented pieces of an old identity. You are living from the center of your being, the place that survived the darkness and emerged with light. You begin to share this inner steadiness without even trying. The way you listen becomes deeper. The way you breathe becomes calmer. The way you move through difficulties carries a subtle grace. You realize that this return isn't about going back to the life you had before. It's about bringing the wisdom of your inner journey into every moment you touch. The life ahead of you becomes less about avoiding pain and more about living with openness. Less about proving yourself and more about expressing your truth. Less about searching outside and more about listening within. It becomes clear that the real gift of this journey is not escape, not perfection, not control, but presence. A way of inhabiting your life with a fuller awareness, a more compassionate heart, and a steadier soul. You understand that peace doesn't come from rearranging the world. It comes from reorienting yourself within it. The challenges that once overwhelmed you now feel like waves you can meet with a grounded stance. Life still brings uncertainty, but you are no longer defined by it. You've learned to return to yourself even in the midst of chaos. And as this realization deepens, something even more profound begins to bloom: a sense of inner freedom, a quiet union between who you are on the surface and who you are in the depths. It is here that the journey reaches its most meaningful completion, where you no longer feel split between the light and the darkness within you. There comes a moment when the journey no longer feels like a path you are walking, but a space you have become. The inner and outer worlds begin to harmonize, not because life has stopped presenting challenges, but because you no longer experience those challenges as something separate from yourself. You no longer fight your shadows or cling desperately to your light. Instead, you begin to understand that both are essential, that every rise and fall, every moment of clarity and every moment of confusion has shaped the person you are now able to inhabit more fully. You feel a quiet union forming within you. The part that once resisted change now begins to trust the unknown. The part that once feared the darkness now recognizes its wisdom. The part that longed for escape now finds freedom in presence. You are no longer pulled apart by opposing forces within you. Instead, they begin to move together, creating a deeper coherence and a deeper sense of belonging within your own being. This freedom doesn't come from eliminating difficulty, but from meeting each moment with an open heart, unafraid of what it might reveal. You stop trying to become someone else. You stop trying to live according to expectations that never belonged to you. You feel the soft relief of settling into your own truth, the quiet joy of realizing that you don't need to perform or perfect anything in order to deserve your own life. There is nothing to chase, nothing to hide from. You allow yourself to breathe without apologizing for the rhythm of your own existence. You begin to live not from fear or pressure, but from alignment, a simple, steady willingness to be who you are, fully and without fragmentation. This is the inner freedom that rises when the soul reawakens. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's a gentle integration, a merging of all the parts you once kept separate. You feel yourself moving through the world with a kind of quiet sovereignty, not above life, but deeply within it. You meet each day not as a battle to survive, but as an opportunity to express the deeper truth you've uncovered. Even the difficult moments feel different now, not as threats, but as invitations to live more honestly, more courageously, more wholeheartedly. And as you rest in this new way of being, you understand something you couldn't see. Before those mornings, when your soul didn't want to wake up, were never signs of collapse. They were signals of transformation. They were the first whispers of a deeper awakening calling you home. What once felt like an ending was simply the opening of a doorway into a more authentic, more luminous life, the life that had been waiting for you all along.